Thanks for dropping by. You ever have one of those days where nothing you planned actually goes okay or even takes place, and things that you had no idea you were going to do end up getting done okay? Well, it's been one of them days. Various reasons, and as a consequence I got something finished off and felt a bit tired, so I thought I'll have a sit down, and there was a darts tournament on, so I put the telly on. I thought we'll watch a bit of that for half an hour and just have a rest and wind down a bit. Fell sound asleep in the chair, and consequently I am filming what used to be called my Sunday morning chat, which the morning bit got dropped because more often than not it didn't make it. It was always into the afternoon, and today it's late afternoon. I'm not normally filming this late on a Sunday. Anyway, what I have completed are several other videos ready to go. They will be next week sometime, but today's the 7th. That's not important, but tomorrow, that means it's the 8th. So we do our everything in bloom on the 8th tomorrow, provided I don't fall asleep in the chair again. Oh dear, that was before I'd had a glass of wine as well. I had no excuse, just tired. It's a very disturbed night for some reason. Woke up many times and just didn't seem to be able to get back to sleep. No reason, or none that I know of. I think the problem is if you get a sudden noise, you wake up with a start. And you might not know what that noise was, but you know something actually woke you. Whereas if it's something a little more distant or whatever, it could disturb you enough to wake you up, but you don't recall what did it. But it happened several times last night, so I probably lost, I don't know, 2-3 hours sleep. Anyway, by the by, today I'm going to wander around the subject of fans, air circulation. Although not specifically, and yet directly and indirectly, we were going to go around the subject. What sparked this off was I was looking into something on the computer, and I got quite deep into that. That's part of why I didn't get what I was supposed to get done and got other things finished. But I was looking into, it's an ecological thing really, and as most of us will accept, the planet is warming. And within that is the science that says it is warming because CO2 levels are getting higher. Greenhouse gases and all that stuff due to our pollution. And you stop and ask yourself, well, where is CO2 coming from? And in the main it's burning stuff, you know, there's stuff like fossil fuels and things like that. There are other reasons. But, and I was looking into CO2, and it suddenly dawned on me, I remembered from a while back that that's a major component in photosynthesis. So I thought, well, right, hang on, we'll join these two little tasks together and start looking at that. And it's the photosynthesis thing is quite special. So there's two processes going on in plants. One is photosynthesis, and there's a formula for it. I don't want to drag it down into real sciencey type stuff, but there is a basic formula for what's going on. And then there's respiration going on, which is virtually the exact reverse of that formula. This is pretty clever stuff for a humble plant with no brain, you know. Sometimes think they got more sense than us. But anyway, what I was looking into, which is where this came from, is that if CO2 levels are important for photosynthesis, which helps our plants grow, you know, and live and survive and all this, that and the other, isn't this extra CO2 actually useful to us? Can we not make it, you know, so that our crops and things like that grow bigger and better? And if you go back into dinosaur times, you know, ancient times like that, with those huge big forests where everything was big, it was because the CO2 levels were so much higher. A lot of volcanic activity and stuff. Again, it's burning stuff, you know. So anyway, that I came at this from several angles because I was looking into what does photosynthesis actually produce, and then what happens to that? And it all got down into plant metabolism, you know, and basically it's a throughput. It's a throughput. You've got moisture, water, loaded with nutrients, coming in at the bottom end of the plant, moving up through the plant and getting dumped off in various places where it's needed and coming out the top. Right, so coming out the top, what's that all about then? There's holes in the leaves, stomata I think it's called, openings in the leaves, and they are for exchanges. Well, we've just talked about stuff coming out, and what about stuff going in? That's where we come back to the photosynthesis. To work, photosynthesis needs carbon, so CO2. That's the form of, that is the gas. It's a very tiny amount of gas actually, considering it's quite toxic to us, but it's not a huge proportion of the air around us. It's quite a small amount. So therefore, the fact that it's damaging our planet by increasing, it's not actually increasing by much. There's enough to do the damage. Anyway, and I looked into it, and your basic photosynthesis process, the magic element in here is light. The energy from light. Notice I said light, not sun. So many of the older books and things like that I've read actually say that photosynthesis cannot take place without sun. Well, yes, it flipping can. It's called grow lights. It's also called a bright day when the sun's behind the clouds. It's light. And it's certain wavelengths of light. I think it's the red and the green. No, the red and the blue, and it's the chlorophyll that is green that reflects the green back away, because the plant doesn't use that bit. Something like that, anyway. That's not the important bit. But for photosynthesis to take place, it needs the carbon dioxide, and it also needs water. Now, water can be in the plant from two places. If it's going to take carbon dioxide in through the leaves, that's air, basically. Okay, it doesn't sort of say, I don't want all the air, I'm going to have that little bit. It takes air in through these openings, yeah? Well, some of that's going to have moisture in it, isn't it? That's your humidity bit. So some of the water's coming in with the carbon dioxide, but there's also a lot of it coming up through the roots that we provide, you know, through the bottom. And you basically, the process takes Can I turn them off? Yes, I can. Just turn the fans off. It's where I've turned the circulating fans off. You just have to raise the temperature here. Remember to put it back again afterwards, or these things will never come on again. Gotcha. They are a bit noisy, those. Right, so you get 6 lots of carbon dioxide. So that's represented by 6 CO2, carbon dioxide being CO2. We all know it as CO2, but when you see it written, you realise that the carbon is joined to 2 oxygens, the O2. The little 2 means there's 2 of these for every one of them. So we need 6 carbon bits. But to take it in through carbon dioxide, we have to have the O2 bit as well. So we get our CO2 in. And for that, we also need 6 H2O molecules, water things, 6 H2O. And what happens with the magic of light and chlorophyll, the photosynthesis process, it produces glucoses, sugars, which then go into other processes. But that's the start point. And that's got a formula that says that glucosey stuff that's produced is 6C H12O6. What does that cobblers all mean? Well, we've already discussed the carbon dioxide coming in was 6 CO2, yeah? Well, if you take the O2 off, you've got 6C. So there's our 6C, yeah? So the photosynthesis process separates out the carbon bit. So we've now got our 6C, and we've got 6 lots of O2 floating around that we haven't used yet. And then H12, yeah? Well, where's that come from? That's hydrogen. Well, we took in 6 lots of H2O, H2. Well, if you've got 6 lots of H2, you've got 12 H, yeah? Are you following this? So we've now got our H12, so we've got our 6 lots of carbon, 12 lots of hydrogen, and now we want 6 lots of oxygen. Well, H2O, we took our 2 hydrogen bits of that, and that left conveniently 6 oxygen molecules. There's our O6. Well, what about the oxygen that was left with the carbon dioxide? We took the 6 lots of carbon out and left 6 lots of O2 floating around. Where does that go then? It's in this process waste. So this is oxygen that's waste in this process that the plant gives off through these little holes. We find that quite useful, that oxygen. It's actually pretty damn useful to us, which is why we have to have plants. Yeah. And strangely enough, if you look at the, I think respiration is like a reverse process. But what I'm getting at is that these holes in the leaves, they're capable of giving off gases. When this process, the respiration, the reverse process, it works the other way round. It takes in oxygen and gives off carbon dioxide. That was why that's more a nighttime thing. Photosynthesis obviously needs the light, so we assume that's a daytime thing. Those noisy gulls. And then the other process is continuous throughout the 24 hours, but it's working on its own at night, yeah, and it's taking in oxygen, which is why a lot of people say you shouldn't have house plants in your bedroom at night because it's using up your oxygen. I don't think one house plant's going to deprive you of oxygen somehow. See, we're talking tiny amounts here, but obviously the process of taking the moisture, nutrients and stuff up through the plant and out through the top requires an escape route. Now we're coming back round to the fans in a long-winded process. For this to get away from the plant, it helps to have some air movement. Yeah? Because it gets away those products. It helps cool the leaves. Yeah? For the same reason. So what happens when it goes wrong then? And how does it go wrong? Well, it goes wrong with temperature. Because when the temperature gets too high, the flow rate increases because the photosynthesis is often higher in better temperatures, normally because the light's better as well. And if it gets to that point where there's not enough coming in through the bottom and too much escaping out the top, the plant will shut down to stop that moisture loss and becoming dehydrated, because the process is speeding up. Yeah, so it'll just shut down. And this is what I've said, if a plant gets to the point where the temperature is such that it's losing more than it can take in, now it could be losing more than it can take in because you haven't given it enough at the bottom end and it's gone dry. So it can be you, but the normal process, yeah? So if the plant decides to shut down at that particular point, what else is happening then? Well, if that moisture coming up through the plant is loaded with nutrients, they now have got nowhere to go. There's no more movement. It's all going static. So you could get a little bit of an overload of some of your nutrients there if it went on for a long time. And don't forget, if the plant shuts those openings down, then photosynthesis stops working because it can't take in the CO2. It's probably got an excess of H2O, but if without that CO2 coming in, without that gas coming in through those little openings, photosynthesis stops. So now it's not feeding itself either. And all that moisture is getting trapped inside the plant because it can't get out. This is not an ideal set of circumstances, is it? So how does a fan help? Well, a fan helps by cooling the leaves down a bit and getting some airflow. Yeah? So that when these openings decide to just open a little bit and see if they can get away with it, excess gases and moisture can flow away quickly. Okay? What else is going on? Now let's have a think about, you've got a moisture laden content trying to get out through these little holes. What about if your humidity is very, very high? It can't get out, yeah? It's a sort of exchange process where for this moisture to get out of the plant, it needs to encounter drier air so that it's got somewhere to go, somewhere to mix, yeah? So your fan would help with moving around air, yes, but when you get very, very high humidity, it slows the escape down. So you're trapping stuff inside the plant. And this often is why rots occur. Yeah? You always think it's pathogens on the outside. It can be problems on the inside of the plant on the grounds that you're giving it plenty of water and it's getting out into the plant and it's all working fine. It just can't get away. So the throughput is trapped. It slows it down. Yeah? What about when humidity is too low? Well, yes, it can get away from the plant, but it gets away at a rather rapid rate. And if it's getting away faster than you can bring it in at the bottom again, it messes up. So this whole thing is a balance, and you have to look at different types of plants, because you'll get like you will read, or it is written, some say that things like Restrepias and stuff like that, like really high humidity. Well, how are they getting away with it then? They're adapted to it. It's the way their metabolism works. Yeah? And a lot of those that like that really high humidity, when you start looking into it, there's an awful lot of them are down the cooler growing end. You see where that takes you? If they're cooler growers, they don't have this problem with the plant shutting down in temperature because they don't get those temperatures. They also come from areas where there's constant air movement, which allows this flow to take place constantly. It's day and night, don't forget. Yeah. So, yeah, your fans are quite important, but it's also worth noting that some plants, given high humidity conditions, don't actually work properly. They're not designed for it. They're designed to get a good throughput going of this process and the excess moisture getting away from the plant. And if the humidity is really high, the process slows down. So your humidity needs to be adapted to what you're growing. It's not common. But what whacking a fan on does is stir it up and stops this humidity coming out from the leaves remaining as a microclimate on the leaves in still air. The fan allows it to clear away and another lot to come out. You see where I'm going with that? Yeah? So this air movement, I'm going to get round to where I started with this in a minute, and basically when I came down here this morning and I opened the door, I thought, hell's that flipping fan doing on? I thought, what controls have I messed up now? And I suddenly realised that this fan here is manual. It's up to me to turn it on and off. And somebody didn't turn it off last night. So what? I'll tell you so what. Normally when I come down in the morning, because it's cold at nights, yeah, the heater and the top circulating fan come on the thermostat. And the temperature in here stays at around 15, basically. That's where I've set it. Now I had a go at this new thermostat, the BioGreen one. On the ground it's got a 2-degree differential that you can't alter. Actually it hasn't in reality. It just needed a bit of thinking. It's basically, yes, it's 2 degrees, but they never get used. So I set it to 15. Well, as the temperature rises, what's the point that cuts it off? It's the point where it clicks from 15 to 16. Yeah? It's actually at that point 16 point a tiny little bit, isn't it? It's left 15 and gone to 16 point something very small. So it hasn't got right up into 16, has it? Heading towards 17. It's just 16. and then it starts to drop down again, comes back down into 15, you know, 0.9, 0.8, it's happy, it's happy. What's the point where it becomes unhappy again? It's not 14.0, is it? It's as soon as it leaves 15 to 14.99999. So it is actually only 1 degree differential, really. It's 1 and a tiny bit. So I'm a lot happier that that actually works the way I want it to now. So it's set to 15, yeah. And I look on here in the morning and that's around 15 or 16 because it's not quite as accurate. And the humidity is up in the 90s. Where was that humidity this morning? 75. Is that better? And the answer is yes. And the reason was that that fan was on all night, keeping everything stirred up and allowing the gaseous and humidity exchanges to take place in the plants better. Yeah? Probably quicker, because again, you know, if everything settles on the leaves, because there's no air movement, processes are slowing, yeah, because stuff's not being able to get away from the plants. So fans are probably a little bit more important than we might have thought, because we normally think of turning a fan on, we call it air circulation, but in our minds most of the time we're thinking, what are we doing? We're actually trying to cool the plants down a bit and stop it getting so warm. But there's a lot more going on when your fans are on. Now I've only got tiny little fans running 24/7. I'm seriously thinking that this fan needs to be on 24/7 as well. Yeah? To help the plants work through the night and stop the build-up of the humidity on the leaf surfaces, forming microclimates and slowing things down. By leaving that circulating fan on, whatever the plant wants to do during the night, it will allow it to do it. The daytime stuff remains the same, but again, I've come down here sometimes and the humidity's 99%, 98%. Is that actually any good? Is that good for the plants? And the answer is probably no, it's not. Some of them might think, heaven. There's an awful lot are probably thinking, this isn't right. This doesn't happen out in nature. Yeah? And some plants don't like really high humidity. You get some of the cattleyas, for instance, where they're growing, you're only looking at perhaps 60, 65% daytime humidities. Yeah, that's not that high, is it? Some people have got that in their house. So, I think we underestimate the importance of what we call air circulation, but what is important is the underlying things that allow that the air circulation allows the plants to be able to do better than if it wasn't there. They're going to do it anyway. You know, if a plant's going to give off moisture through these little openings, first of all they've got to be open, so it shouldn't get too hot. Yeah? And for the exchanges to take place, what's on top of the leaf, on the surface, shouldn't be the same as what's trying to get out. Yeah? So with the humidity, the moisture being let go by the plant because it's finished with it, at that point it's a waste product, it needs to expel it. The sooner that gets away from the plant, the better. So, yeah, and there are certain types of plants that I don't have anything to do with whatsoever, and never have, because they're illegal in this country. That in some countries you can grow them by the flipping shed-full, and some people do. They are enhanced dramatically by growing them in sealed areas and controlling the air inside. And which bit of the air do they control? It's the CO2. So they have a CO2 enriched environment, and plants grow much quicker and twice as big. So is this excess CO2 in our atmosphere a bad thing or a good thing? In fact, it would probably be an absolutely brilliant thing if we didn't exist on the planet. Right, how could I increase CO2 out here? Well, there's a simple answer to that. Be out here. Because what happens every time I breathe out? we would complement each other. Yeah? So anyway, just some thoughts about air circulation and humidity levels. And when you ask yourself, can the humidity level be too high? This isn't going to happen in the home. If you've got humidity levels that we class as too high for your orchids in your home, then chances are you've got mould growing on your curtains and your carpet's rotting. So it's not normally a thing to worry about in the home. You're more interested in the home of getting the humidity up a bit. Yeah. But it was an interesting, that was part of the sidetrack today, was starting to look into this, and I just got into it, and at one point I thought, crikey, I haven't had a coffee for about an hour and a half. But that's bad. Right, so a change for me. The amount of energy that fan is going to use by leaving it on 24/7 is not going to dramatically increase my bill relative to the overall bill, if you see what I mean. And I don't even think I'd be able to see the result. But maybe I will. Yeah, maybe I will. Because if the plants are slowing up and not being able to create their functions efficiently, then their growth will slow. Yeah? So maybe by having a better air circulation, I'll go back to that expression now, 24/7 could produce better results. What could it avoid? Well, we've had a bit of rot in the Cattleyas recently, haven't we? 95 plus humidity overnight, when overnight is 16 hours during the winter. Only 8 hours daylight, 8 from 24 last time I looked was 16. That's a long time to be in a humidity level far beyond what the plant would normally ever get. Yeah? I've had a few odd bulbs go on some of the Oncidium types, but where they come from, their humidity level would generally be a bit higher. Yeah? So, and then you get into others, you know, like the pleurothalids mainly. They come from much higher humidity levels, but then they don't tend to have the problem with the heat. Yeah, so it's a combination of all these things, and we're forever trying to get as close to a perfect environment for our orchids as we can. We get as close as we can. That's why I say that. I don't think any of us would say we have a perfect environment, but we get as close as we can. And a little tweak every now and again for possible improvement sounds good to me. So this photosynthesis needs to happen. You need to get those sugars, glucoses into the plant, and it can be stopped by humidity being too high for the plant type, combined with either or far too warm for the plant. Plant will shut down. When it shuts down those little openings, photosynthesis stops. Without that process, there's a lot of other stuff ain't going to work. So you're shutting the plant down. This is not good stuff. And a fan will help for several reasons, not just one. It's not just cooling the leaves, it's just helping stuff move away from the plant and towards the plant. Yeah, that's another thing. You know, you get dead still air when the plant's trying to take in carbon dioxide, and it's not getting any fresh to take that from. And there we go back to, should you change the air in your growing environment? Well, yes, you flipping should. In a sealed environment, or very close to a sealed environment, you could, in a warm day, you could have a shortage of CO2 because your plants are using it faster than it's getting replaced through the little holes. Now, when my extractor and inlet fan come on, I wouldn't have that problem because I'm going to change the whole of the air in here in about 3 minutes. The fans are that good. You know, they work in cubic meters of air. There ain't that many cubic meters in here, are there? Not really. Yeah, so changing the air is good stuff. Opening a window is good stuff, providing it doesn't chill the plants or provide a draft. Yeah, fresh air is good. It's the change of air is what we're getting at by calling it fresh air. You're replacing what has been used, and that will be different during the day and the night because the plants are working back to front. Yeah, so daytime, take in carbon dioxide, give out oxygen. That's useful because we're running around in the daytime doing stuff. Yeah, we need a bit of oxygen. But nighttime, that switches round. Yeah, they're actually taking in the oxygen and giving out the carbon dioxide, and that process is a much slower process, but it continues 24/7. That's the difference. Photosynthesis needs the light, so it's a daytime thing, but it's a much faster process. So it needs to take that carbon dioxide in, especially in warmer temperatures. With the right level of humidity, it needs a fair bit of it. So replacing the air, or replenishing the air, is good stuff. So yeah, it's just some stuff that's going on with your plants that you might not even think about. But I must admit the photosynthesis, I just find a little bit of a miracle the way that actually works. Takes in things that are normally readily available and converts them into food. I suppose we do the same thing, shoveling stuff into our faces, but ours is a little bit more complicated than that. So, yeah, so keep your air on the move. What's your humidity level? Both too low and too high slows the plant down. It means it's not working as efficiently as a unit as it could be. And we need all the help we can get to keep our plants healthy and keep them going. So that's the other thing, you see, if the plants are giving off moisture, you know, the escape of the moisture, and it's sitting on the leaves because there's no air movement, what does that encourage then? What likes a soggy place to live with a reasonable bit of temperature? Yeah, that's pathogens and all that sort of stuff, isn't it? The moulds and the rots and things like that. So yet again, we're back to move the air, keep it going, keep it moving around. And just having a look at my zygo spike out of the corner of my eye. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's either 5 or 6 distinct buds showing now. That doesn't mean they'll all make it. We could get an old blaster in there somewhere. And the other spike, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 definites, possible 6. So we've gone from none to 5 or 6 on 2 spikes. I'd class that as an improvement, wouldn't you? Right, I'm going to go and relax now. Well, I process this, that doesn't take a lot. And we'll have the everything in bloom tomorrow, that'll be the 8th. And then the 2 videos to come might not be of interest to everybody. One of them is looking into the TDS and pH of the cocoa husk in soak. So that's a little sort of 2-day experiment. That's finished. And the other thing I've got on the go is the second video in the series of the 2 Miltonias being fed differently throughout the season, one getting a much higher level than the other plant. So I've got another video in that series as well. And then sometime during next week, my 3 Phalaenopsis that are growing in the house are going to get repotted, despite one of them being in bloom. It's not exactly a brilliant spike, I'm not fussed if I lose it. But you know, not that long ago we did the 2 Oncidiums in the house, and it dawned on me that they were got around the same time, and the chances are the Phalaenopsis have been in those pots the same amount of time, in Orchiata bark that was probably a few years old before it was used. It wasn't shiny new. Okay, it hadn't been used before, but I'd owned it and it had been open for some considerable time. So I've got a feeling that's why some of my Orchiata bark's been going off sooner than I anticipated. It's because it was already aging before I'd even used it. And that's the problem when you buy a big sack full and only use 1/3 of it. The 2/3 of it then sits there till spring the next year perhaps, or even the year after. So it's already getting old and you haven't even got it out the bag yet. So I might pay to buy more appropriate amounts, which is what I'm doing now. Anyway, so no plants to look at, I don't think. No, because I've got some new blooms, but I'll leave them till tomorrow, as we're doing them tomorrow anyway. And It's more about things going over and things still to come rather than things actually with us now. But we've got a few things to look at tomorrow, so we'll get that done. And look after your plants. Have a think every now and again. I mean, we all water our plants, and a lot of the time that's the only time we give them a good look over. Well, the looking is important. I've said a lot of people look and don't see. They pick the plant up, they water it and put it back, and it can be covered in bugs and they just don't see them. So not looking closely and objectively. Well, next time you pick up your plants and look at them objectively, mainly checking for bugs and problems, things not quite right, bit of rot here, funny colour on that leaf or something like that, have a think objectively about that environment. Again, can it be tweaked and made a bit better? And some airflow that isn't there and could be is a real good improvement. Yeah. But don't sit your plants in a force 8 gale. They do not like that level of air movement. If you can see the leaves just gently doing that, just gently flickering, that's enough. If they're doing that, it's too much. I remember I went to see our ex-president who died a while ago, Keith Andrews, ran a nursery not too far from where I lived at the time, and I went to see his nursery. And I opened one of the doors in one of the big Cymbidium greenhouses, and there was a fan up one end. I mean, you always remember things bigger or whatever, you know, when you think back. But it seemed to me that the whole of the other end of the greenhouse was a fan, and all the plants were all like this, blasted away like that, and the leaves really were flapping around. Now, whether that stayed on like that 24/7, I don't know, but that seemed a little bit over the top to me. It's the only thing I remember about that nursery was that fan, and the plants really were whacking around, you know. I don't remember anything else about it, but yeah. Right, that'll do for today. Have we got a one-liner joke? I don't think I have today. Nope, can't think of one. Maybe another time. I might have to refresh my list of one-liners. They're not mine, I just steal them off other people. But have I done my déjà vu joke yet? See you next time.